If you've invested in US stocks over the last decade, you've made serious money and looked very smart in the process. For many investors though, when something works for long enough, it starts shaping how we think about investing, often without us noticing, to the point where it feels safe enough to ignore everything else and continue what we're doing. International diversification is like the red-headed stepchild, since it tends to lag during long US stock runs, which makes everyone question whether it still deserves a place in our portfolios. Now lately, I've been seeing a lot more questions pop up about investing in international markets, and I know exactly why that is. So let's walk through how to think about international exposure when US stocks dominate, how risk shifts during long periods of success, where blind spots tend to show up, and how to decide whether international exposure belongs in your portfolio and in what amount. The reason I started getting more questions about investing in international stocks recently is simple. Last year, they outperformed US stocks by a large amount. World ex-US markets finished up around 32%. While the US market was around 17%. That gap is hard to ignore, especially after a long stretch where the opposite was true. Previously, international stocks were easy to overlook because they weren't keeping up with the US markets. But when the previous leader flips to a new one, even if it's temporary, people start questioning if they need some international exposure. The longer you invest, the easier it becomes to notice this pattern show up over and over again. Money tends to move toward whatever just worked. Last year was a clear example of that. International stock ETFs saw record inflows with more than double the amount of money flowing in compared to the year before. Investors love to chase after what's hot in the moment and what performed well in the past, even if we all know that the unknown future performance is really all that matters. For more than a decade, US stocks delivered strong, consistent results. Returns came from the same place year after year. And that kind of success shaped expectations to the point where it started to feel reliable, almost like something we could always count on. For anyone who started investing after 2010, most of their experience took place during a time when US stayed on top without ever being messed with. Investors who tilted their investments in that direction were handsomely rewarded. And when that keeps happening, human nature kicks in. Confidence grows, and over time, portfolios drift further and further in the same direction. It's easy to underestimate how that experience carries a lot of weight. When a choice keeps producing positive outcomes, it reinforces the belief that you are doing the right thing. The structure of US companies reinforces that comfort as well. Many of the biggest companies here sell products all over the world. They make money overseas, grow in international markets, and benefit from global demand. So it's easy to look at a US-only portfolio and think, oh yeah, I'm already getting enough global exposure. We love simplicity on this channel, and that plays a role as well. A portfolio that's all US stocks is just easier since it has fewer funds or fewer times where one part of the portfolio lags so badly that it grabs your attention. That makes it so much easier to stick with. Add them together, long-term performance, global business exposure, and simplicity, and it makes total sense why a 100% US portfolio feels like a great way to invest. That concentration doesn't usually feel risky while it's building. What changes is how much your future starts depending on the same set of outcomes continuing to go your way. Over long stretches, market leadership tends to narrow. A smaller group of companies ends up doing more of the heavy lifting. As those companies grow, they take up more space in the index. When your portfolio is closely tied to that index, a larger share of your results ride on fewer moving pieces. The US market has been a good example of this. A handful of very large companies have driven a meaningful share of total returns. As they performed well, they naturally became a bigger part of the market. Portfolios that leaned into US stocks benefited from that concentration. While this is great if you had invested in those, which we US investors did, we didn't know that was going to be the case until after the fact. And we sure as heck don't know if that will continue going forward. When most of your portfolio is tied into one country, a lot of things start moving together. Your money is tied to the same currency, the same government policies, the same regulatory rules, and the same economic background. As long as that environment keeps lining up in your favor, results usually look great. Now, when that environment changes, the effects tend to show up across the portfolio at the same time. This is where diversification starts to matter more. Having exposure outside the US helps spread that uncertainty across different markets instead of having everything tied to one set of assumptions. That way, you're not attempting to act like a palm reader trying to predict what's going to happen next. You just let the market decide over time and do what it's going to do whether you're watching it or not. Holding international stocks doesn't mean giving up on US companies or expecting them to struggle in the future. It means your entire portfolio doesn't have to rely on one country continuing to deliver the same results the same way it has in the past. One of the most common responses to everything we've talked about so far goes something like this. Yeah, but US companies already operate all over the world. And that's true. A lot of the biggest US companies sell products everywhere, they make money overseas, and they benefit from growth in other countries. When people point that out, they're not wrong. But there's a difference between a company doing business globally and your portfolio being exposed to the global markets. When you own a US stock, you are still tied to how the stock is priced, traded, and owned inside the US market. It's priced in US dollars, it trades on US exchanges, it reacts to US investor behavior, US interest rates, and US policy decisions. So even if a company earns a big chunk of its revenue overseas, the stock itself tends to move with the US market. That's why during major market moves, US stocks usually move together. The global sales don't stop that. The structure of the market matters more in those moments than where the customers live. There's also an entire part of the global market that never shows up in a US-only portfolio. When you only stick to US stocks, you miss companies that are rooted in other economies. A lot of them you probably even recognize. Banks in Europe, manufacturers in Asia, consumer companies in emerging markets, entire industries that grow and change based on local conditions instead of US ones. These companies aren't some phony, worthless startups that exist to burn cash and look trendy. They're real freaking businesses that respond to different cycles, different policies, different economic conditions, and exist to dominate. That's where direct international exposure starts to matter. It gives your portfolio access to parts of the world that don't move the same way as the US market all the time. Sometimes they're gonna lag, and sometimes they're gonna lead, like last year. And that's kind of the point. When you actually hold international stocks, they tend to feel like this black box of unknowns, mostly because the companies operate in other parts of the world that we're not paying attention to. This can cause 100% US stock investors to write the whole thing off and put it in the too difficult to worry about section of their brain. For example, I was just looking through some of the international companies I invest in and came across one called MediaTek out of Taiwan. I had zero clue this company even existed until now. The headlines around international companies are way harder to follow because they're, no pun intended, foreign. The returns also don't line up with what's happening in the US, and sometimes they look good or bad for very different reasons that aren't so obvious. One year it might be because of, we'll say, currency, another year it might be local politics, and another year it might just be the region going through a rough stretch. From the outside looking in, it can feel messier than it actually is. Compare that to US stocks. Even if most of us don't know every single company, we usually have a better sense of what's going on because we hear about it all the time. When was the last time you heard news about frickin' MediaTek out of Taiwan? Probably never. Hell, I bet people in Taiwan have probably never heard of the company either. The difference in feel between US and international stocks is a big reason people struggle with it. This is also where investing in broad international funds starts to matter. As with investing in 100% stocks, when you own thousands of companies spread across dozens of countries, no single headline ends up carrying the whole portfolio. Some markets struggle, others are going to hold up better, and some currencies are weaker while others are strong. Everything doesn't move perfectly together all the time. The volatility and periods of lagging the US market are the whole point of the international diversification experience, which is exactly why it feels psychologically harder to stick with and why so many people abandon ship at the wrong time. But that unevenness is exactly what makes them useful alongside US stocks. One thing that helps make all of this click is realizing what's baked into any portfolio from the start. At any given time, you're going to have things that are doing great, things that are doing fine but not amazing, and things that are lagging behind. That's true whether you're investing in individual stocks, sector ETFs, index funds, US markets, or global markets. There's no version of investing where everything you own is winning at the same time. And I think that's why the word underperformance trips a lot of people up. Underperformance doesn't automatically mean something did poorly. It just means that it did less well than something else. And those are two very different things. Last year was the perfect example. US stocks quote unquote underperformed international stocks. World ex-US markets were up around 32%, while US stocks were up almost 17%. 18 freaking percent is an insane return by any normal standards. But because something else did better, it gets labeled as underperformance. And once that label shows up, people start questioning whether they should be holding it at all. This is where expectations get disconnected from reality. A lot of people go into investing thinking everything they own should be the biggest winner. You hear it all the time, especially when people talk about index funds or diversified portfolios. They say, you know what? I don't like owning funds that hold losing stocks, so investing in diversified index funds doesn't make sense for me. I only like to invest in winning stocks, not those losers. I always laugh a little bit when I hear that because the outcome that they're describing, it doesn't exist. There has never been a point in history where even the best investors in the world owned nothing but winners. Not Warren Buffett, not shady politicians, basically all of them, not hedge funds, not anyone. Every real portfolio has lagging investments. The difference is whether you accept that as part of the deal or constantly try to fix it. With a globally diversified portfolio, that reality just shows up more clearly. Sometimes US stocks lead, sometimes international stocks lead. Most of the time, they're just taking turns. Instead of looking at that rotation as a bug, look at it as a feature of investing and not something to be avoided. In fact, look at it as evidence that the portfolio is actually doing what it's designed to do. Instead of eliminating underperformance, global diversification spreads it out. It trades the hope of always owning the best performing thing for a structure that doesn't depend on guessing which thing will be next. Once people get comfortable with the idea that underperformance is normal and rotation is a part of investing, the next question always comes up. Okay, so how much international should I actually have? And this is where I think being too vague doesn't really help anyone. So I'm going to do my best to help you think through this and at least give you some guardrails. Let me put this out there right off the rip. There's no perfect answer here. But I do think that there are reasonable boundaries that we can come up with. On the high end, a good reference point is a total world index fund ETF like Vanguard's VT. Inside that fund, the split between US and international stocks is based on market size, not someone's opinion. Right now, that works out to roughly about 60% US and around 40% international. If you owned the entire global stock market and just let it float naturally, that's roughly where you'd land based on the size of each market. On the low end, I think around 15% international is a good solid starting point for most people. At that level, you're getting meaningful exposure outside of the US without completely changing how your portfolio behaves. You'll still notice periods where international lags, but it usually won't dominate your results or your emotions. Between those 2 points, roughly 15% on the low end and global market weight of 40% on the high end is where most reasonable allocations live. From there, the decision becomes behavioral. But be careful, because if you jump straight to something like 30% international allocation and then panic the first time it lags badly, I would say that you bit off a little more than you could chew. Now, while things like that do happen, it's not a moral failure, but it is something you can usually avoid. That's why if someone isn't sure how much they can handle, I like the idea of starting at 15% and then adjusting slowly from there in smaller steps, usually 5% increments at a time. The reason is because you need to get yourself psychologically used to holding international stocks to the point where you're comfortable and confident with that decision. After you live with it for a while, you decide if you're okay with adding a little more or not. If you're not, then no big deal. If you are, then say bump it up by, 5%, and then rinse and repeat this process until you find a good allocation for yourself. Personally, I'm sitting at 15% international allocation right now, and I'm comfortable there. I'm open to moving closer to 20% over time, but behaviorally, that's where I'm at today. Remember that the goal here is to pick an allocation you can stick with through the boring years, through the frustrating ones, and the years when everything else looks way better than what you own. It's not about picking the perfect allocation because no one actually knows what that is until after the fact. And Elon has not built a time machine yet, so going back and fixing that isn't an option anyways. Now, even if you do invest in an international index fund, there's a few things that you need to know about index funds that aren't so obvious, which you can learn about in this video to your left next. Hit that like button and share the video with someone you think needs to see it. I'll see you in the next one, friends. Done.